Threat detected. Frozen yogurt consumption and violent crime rates correlate. Recommend mandatory house arrest for consumers.
Oi, oi, you muddy fugglers! Get in here, sit down, we're going to read some news. The entire world is going to change pretty much in the next decade, I imagine. I think AI is going to flip the table and change everything from politics to media to art. It's already doing it now. But how will all of this upheaval in AI affect crime? Will we be in a position where we'll be able to deal with potential criminals better than we have been? I don't know. Is there a solution that doesn't involve throwing everyone in prison? But when it comes to the subject of AI and crime prediction, I found this article on Wired, written by Matt Burgess and also somebody called Mark Wilding. British police built a sprawling crime prediction machine. Some results couldn't be trusted. As UK police embrace the AI revolution, a wide investigation reveals the messy inside story of one region's experiment with predictive analytics. So with building profiles of you and deciding whether or not those potential crimes are worthy of attention. The Think Family database holds records on close to 500,000 people who live in the city of Bristol, England. For many years, few of them knew anything about it. Launched in 2016 by the Bristol City Council and the regional Avon and Somerset Police, the database has stored all manner of sensitive information: police intelligence reports, housing status, mental health records, teenage pregnancies, enrollment in parenting courses, free school meals. On top of this sensitive data, officials built machine learning models to assign scores to thousands of adults and children. They hope to build what they called a picture of threat, harm and risk in the region. At an event in early 2022 to help officials tackle child exploitation crimes, one police data scientist described part of the approach this way: I essentially dump all that data in a big bucket and stir it with a data science spatula. We come out with a lovely risk score for everybody. There you go. Is this going to be your social credit score? Maybe your risk to the system at large? I guess that's actually effectively what that is. Are you a net positive or net negative? So we already do it with a credit score anyway. So anybody clutching their pearls at this idea, maybe look at the world around you at the moment. This risk scoring inside the Think Family database was just one part of Avon and Somerset Police's sprawling predictive analytics program. Among at least 23 separate models the force created were algorithms to identify the risk that people would commit burglary, fail to turn up in court, go missing, or become a victim of domestic abuse. One senior officer described creating a league table of the area's most dangerous criminals, an apparent reference to the offender management app, which was designed to hold data on around 300,000 people in the region. How the police have developed and used their predictive tools hasn't always been clear to the public. John Pegram, the leader of a local police accountability group in Bristol, says he didn't hear about the offender management app until 2023, years after it had been created. When he did learn about it, he began to suspect he might be included. I think I knew I was on the app, Pegram says. In early 2024, Pegram filed a request to find out how the police were using his data. The police refused to say. Months later, after Pegram had hired solicitors to work on his case, the police confirmed he was on the app but declined to elaborate further. Like others across Bristol, the UK, and increasingly around the world, Pegram didn't know whether he had been scored by an algorithm, what that score might be, or how it could affect his interactions with the authorities. Wired, working in partnership with the non-profit newsroom Liberty Investigates, plus the Bristol Cable and Lighthouse reports, obtained hundreds of pages of documentation from public records requests to build the most comprehensive picture to date of Avon and Somerset's regional experiment with data collection and predictive analytics. Liberty, the parent organisation of Liberty Investigates, had some early involvement in the potential legal challenge to the programme and continues to support Pegram's litigation. The investigation reveals that at least 2 of these risk-scoring models were quietly abandoned after Bristol City Council staff deemed they could no longer trust them. Previously unreported documents show government inspectors and independent reviewers highlighting a startling lack of transparency about some elements of the program and warning that the systems could undermine public trust. Well, it's not exactly a new thing that police would retain records of criminals. It's whether or not the people on these records have committed crimes or not. But I'm wondering how the experiment going on over there is going to affect my country. Police data disclosed to Wired comprising more than 36,000 model performance scores appear in some cases to show genuinely poor predictive performance, according to an independent analysis who reviewed the data for Wired. These findings come as the UK appears poised to embrace predictive analytics and artificial intelligence across the criminal justice system. A familiar face is helping lead the charge, the former Chief Constable of Avon and Somerset, Andy Marsh, who now heads the national standard-setting body for forces across England and Wales. As CEO of the College of Policing, Marsh has said that effective AI should be injected like heroin to speed up British police work. Excuse me, what is this comparison here? Hang on, what? Marsh has said that effective AI should be injected like heroin to speed up British police work. You're being derogatory there. Don't do that. Obviously don't do that. In Minecraft, maybe, but not there. In reality. In a recent interview, Marsh said his organization was examining around 100 currently deployed AI tools, including for predictive policing. Our job is to test the ones that work properly, test them with rigorous evaluation, and then spread them like wildfire through policing. He's got very violent analogies, this man, hasn't he? Wildfire and heroin. Calm down, sir. How one of Britain's biggest citizen scoring programs evolved. Lots of this stuff going on. Avon and Somerset Police confirms it still uses 9 predictive analytics models for purposes including assessing risk of individuals committing or becoming victims of crime. In March 2024, a central government report finds local authorities in the Avon and Somerset region had been cautious about sharing data with the police due to concerns about how it would be used. Naughty popos. Bristol City in June 23. Council documents reveal the local authority had stopped using predictive analytics models to assess risk of child exploitation. So you stopped, you stopped, and then you kind of started again. When did you start doing it? All the way back in February 2014. So they're gathering your data there and running a test program on predicting crimes, on pre-crime basically. In 2014, Avon and Somerset Police was under pressure on multiple fronts. The force, like others across the UK, had seen its budget slashed. Its chief constable had been suspended. An official report had highlighted its failure to stick to procedures to protect some victims of domestic abuse. After that report was published, the force's head of performance said, "We believe predictive analytics is the solution." I mean, it's not something that is going to return bad data necessarily if you're doing it correctly. And it makes sense. If there are areas that have more crime, then you perhaps want to station more police officers in that area to respond to crime quicker. So retaining information about criminals and their geographical location stuff makes some sense. But are they criminals beforehand or just people who said silly things online? Gary Davies, a former police chief superintendent who had moved to a role at the Bristol City Council 2 years earlier, was thinking along similar lines. Davies led a team at the council supporting children and families. When families were in crisis, it was blatantly obvious, he says. It was much harder to spot those who were at the top of a downward spiral. Well, because they're still doing good. Davies believed the answer lay in data. A child's school might hold a record of increasing absences, while the police might know if the child had recently witnessed domestic abuse for the first time. On their own, these might not be enough to trigger an intervention from social services, but together, if you could see the whole picture, you would realise that the trajectory they were on was going in the wrong direction, he says. I imagine the teachers at their schools would also know. They'd be the ones who spend most time with them, which is a weird thing, really, considering they have families and stuff, but yeah, you see your teachers more than your parents at a certain age. Starting in 2015, a small group of Bristol City Council and Avon Somerset Police staff moved into one of the city's police stations to work on a solution to that problem together. The Insight Bristol team, headed by Davies, started pulling together data from across the public sector to provide frontline workers with all the information they might need about children and families. The Insight Bristol team didn't seek residents' consent to use their data in the Think Family database. Instead, Davies explains the team relied on legal gateways, a term that describes when data sharing is deemed necessary to meet an agency's legal obligations, such as the need to protect children. So they have an excuse. They've got a legal excuse to siphon your data. So if in this situation, any concern to protect children in this instance, then they can just tap your phone and get your information, maybe? In Bristol. It's like saying in Minecraft, it's in Bristol, okay? It's just in Bristol. Apparently. If you were to give the impression that people had consent, then it creates a false illusion, because actually, as a local authority or police or whoever, we have to keep those records. Initially, residents could not opt out of the database. Later, the council included an opt-out option in its tax letters for residents. Now, I wonder if that opt-out was actually honoured. Just because you've checked a box on a piece of paper doesn't mean it's going to filter through to the actual back end. Davies, who recently retired, believes the project did help protect children and improve the understanding of risk and vulnerability for children and families. He says it provided that information in a far more efficient way. When it came to communicating that to the public, Davies says it was fairly difficult to get any enthusiasm or interest from groups of people. Those who did engage said they understood the need to use personal data, he recalls, summarizing the feedback as, "We don't mind you using it to support us, but we don't want you to use it against us." Yeah, but they will. I mean, if you're inclined to do something naughty and they've pre-crimed you and they've surrounded your house, he's in there thinking about eating cake. Bad cake. That reminds me of that Brass Eye fake news show about cake.
The classic street signs of a nearby drug abuse. But what about this? Remnants of something far worse. A new legal drug from Czechoslovakia called cake. Oh, and luckily the story involves these people. Free the United Kingdom from drugs, and British opposition to metabolically bisturbile drugs.
Anyway, moving on. While the Insight Bristol team was busy creating the Think Family database, Avon and Somerset Police had begun exploring the potential of predictive analytics. In March 2016, the Force's Ethics Committee met to consider how the work should proceed. Members advised that careful consideration had to be given to what data is used and the variables that are used in the process, concluding, the use of the system must be treated with some caution and it must be ensured that there is no bias. Well, you've got bias for laws, I assume, and also bias for how you interpret those laws. The committee advised that if the Force's predictive analytics work was to proceed, the public must be informed as to why and how you are carrying out such processes. Once work to compile the Think Family database was completed, a police data scientist spearheaded the development of predictive risk models for the project. One of those models aimed to identify children at risk of sexual exploitation. The CSE model, as it was known, drew on a wide range of datasets held by the police, council, and other public agencies. Interesting that this may come in line with the reports on grooming gangs over there. Did they find similar patterns with certain groups of people, maybe? Bernardo's, a child protection charity, provided anonymized data involving 1,000 children known to have been sexually abused. The model was designed to detect children with similar characteristics. The system analyzed children's social connections to determine if they were linked to anyone else deemed vulnerable to or a likely perpetrator of exploitation. This is almost floating around the "they knew before" kind of malarkey that we've seen in some crimes. Being flagged as in need, persistently absent from school, or having mental health concerns would increase scores created by the CSE model, documents say. The police's efforts to draw on such a wide range of data raised early concerns. In 2018, researchers at Cardiff University's Data Justice Lab reviewed several UK citizen scoring programs, including the work in Bristol, noting the variables being used can, in practice, be proxies for poverty. Davies recalls that most of the children with the highest risk scores were already on the authorities' radar. There were complicated children already being worked with by social workers and family workers, he says. Most of the output told you what you already knew. Poverty is a big factor, but not every impoverished group is as inclined to abuse children. Still, the police's enthusiasm for predictive analytics was undimmed. We want to make choices today that will prevent the crime from happening in the first place, the police business intelligence manager said in 2018. A model for predicting child criminal exploitation, which according to Bristol City Council was introduced in 2019, again drew on data from a wide range of public agencies, including whether a family was receiving housing support or in rent arrears, and if a child was receiving free school meals. That year, Chief Constable Andy Marsh announced, in 12 months every part of Avon and Somerset Constabulary will be driven through predictive analytics and visualization. It's a very ugly view of a British-looking town. Across the UK, other law enforcement agencies had been conducting their own experiments in predictive policing, with mixed results. Kent Police, the first UK force to test the technology, had recently cancelled its contract with the US firm Predpol, saying it had been challenging to show the program reduced crime. Durham Constabulary had come under fire for using social demographic data to try to predict risk of reoffending. By comparison, Avon and Somerset Police looked like a success story, maybe. But also, having that data bound geographically is a good way for police stations to be apportioned funding, I suppose. If they have certain kinds of crimes that require certain kinds of equipment or training, maybe that will become more specific to their needs, I guess. But this is all me speculating based on people who have already committed crimes and are therefore able to be recorded. This appears to be anyone and everyone getting siphoned into it. Behind the scenes, though, the police's predictive analytics work seemed messy, according to Al Pearson, a researcher at Royal Holloway University of London, who was completing a PhD study in the programs. When I started, nobody could tell me what data they had or where it came from or what system was using which data, says Pearson, who has interviewed more than a dozen staff members from the police and local councils. Well, if they can't clearly trace where the data came from, can they verify it is actually accurate or not? What is the accuracy of a data set that you have no paper trail over? Over time, Pearson observed a function creep, with systems becoming more expansive, combining more data and spreading beyond their original purpose. Yes, feature creep we call it. I've never heard it called function creep. While conscientious teams oversaw the development of data analytics, Pearson says, there was little transparency. In some instances, it might just be one person who's creating these risk models that are making decisions affecting potentially hundreds of thousands of people, Pearson says. By 2021, according to a review of Insight Bristol in government records obtained by Wired, officials from the Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation, since dissolved, were hearing of ethics tensions associated with the project. Large amounts of sensitive data had gone into the risk scores, the reviewers said, noting that it had been gathered using legal gateways, rather than building trust with local people. Well, that's just excuses. That's basically to say, we got the data and you can't tell us off for it because, air quotes, legal gateways. Legality is not the same as legitimacy, they said. Well, I guess it is, though, really, if that's how you're defining what is and isn't able to be done. 2 years later, the non-profit organization Social Finance conducted an independent review of the Think Family database and Insight Bristol's data work. The 100-plus page review, which appears to have been made public only after a records request from Wired, was commissioned by Bristol City Council and the nearby Somerset Council, which was planning a similar system. Oh no, it's spreading. The review found that the Think Family database and its visualizations had been useful for child protection staff and could lead to timelier responses. However, it's described the risk scoring models as the weakest element of the project, noting that a lack of accuracy had undermined their potential to be useful. So in this sense, they're focusing on the children and their risk in relation to their family, whereas a lot of these children who have been trafficked and abused, it's come from outside of the family. Has it not? Is that not what these grooming gangs have been doing? Council staff had raised doubts about the models designed to assess risk of child sexual exploitation. and child criminal exploitation. The review was completed around the same time the council stopped using the models, which staff had recently described as not fit for operational use. While previously the CSE and CCE models had largely been telling staff what they already knew, according to Gary Davies, the former head of the Insight Bristol team, those same social workers told the social finance reviewers they increasingly found the algorithms to be inaccurate. In an email about the CSE model, one staffer had written, "There are people who have been victims of sexual offences in the last month scoring below those who've been perpetrators of burglaries." According to the Social Finance Review, there was a reason for the sudden drop in perceived quality. Well, hang on, that's comparing apples and oranges. People who have been victims of sexual offence, these perpetrators of burglaries, yeah, that's apples and oranges. I mean, I don't know. You're scoring likely victimhood and likely perpetratoryhood. You're either a victim or a criminal there, surely. It's a weird comparison. According to the Social Finance Review, there was a reason for the sudden drop in perceived quality. Police had stopped using Bristol's City Council data. Officials wanted to profile children across the entire Avon and Somerset police boundary. 5 separate councils with the same algorithmic approach, the review says. While the force tried to strike data sharing agreements with other local authorities, those efforts stalled, meaning the only data it could use to develop the algorithm was its own. This would include perpetrators and victims of crime, but not the array of sensitive social factors the model had drawn on before. So they were limited from accessing data from non-criminals and non-victims. That's what I'm seeing there. And so the ability for the models to predict declined. After the switch, Bristol City Council said children who should have been identified as vulnerable were not listed in the results. Personally, I feel uncomfortable using it to guide our work because of the lack of transparency on where the numbers come from and how it was developed, one staff member told Social Finance. Another said, "I wouldn't go into a meeting saying I'd seen this on TFD because I wouldn't be confident that it is accurate enough." One told the reviewers, "We know there's young girls that get criminally exploited, but they don't come up. We don't talk about them because they don't fit." Another added, "I used to spend a lot of time methodically going through the 30 names, emailing people and checking all their details, but it took up so much of my time that I kind of stopped doing that." When the social finance reviewers wanted to conduct their own tests on the risk scoring models, they discovered a startling lack of available information. Source code and variables that detail how these models were created was unable to be found, which prevented us completing this element from the evaluation, the report says. Social Finance declined to comment on its report. So garbage in, garbage out. Because I'm imagining they are not inclined to profile people based on national origin or other cultural parameters, the data set that they're pulling out there is not actually that helpful, maybe. I think there is maybe a dangerous level of wokery that is suppressing these models from actually being useful. So they're only able to pull in data from criminals and victims now. And so if those crimes are being suppressed, then it's going to F up the database. Likewise, responses to public records requests from the council and the police suggest neither authority kept records about the decision to stop using the CSE and CCE models by June 2023. Rob Proctor, Professor of Social Informatics at the University of Warwick, acted as an expert consultant on the Social Finance Review. The process to build the models was not documented in anything like sufficient detail, he says. For him, the work in Bristol illustrated the critical need for transparency and public debate about the merits of such an approach whenever it is being considered. This really raises the question of how you involve the public in deciding to develop and deploy these kinds of tools, and addressing people's rightful concerns that this could lead to people being wrongly targeted, he says. You have to consider the impact that even one false positive has on a family if a child is flagged as at risk of criminal or sexual exploitation. Others express similar concerns. Debbie Watson is a professor in child and family welfare at the University of Bristol, where she has been leading a team researching the Think Family project since 2022. Watson says she has concerns about historical harms that may have been caused by the risk scoring models. Whilst they may no longer be in operation, their use appears to have been significant in ways that have seriously impacted some young people in the city. Bristol City declined interview requests about the use of predictive risk scoring systems and did not answer detailed questions sent by Wired. Very naughty. This administration does not use any predictive analytics apart from helping to identify children who are at risk of becoming not in education, employment, or training after finishing school, so they can collect the data from schools. Okay. Councillor Christine Townsend, the chair of the Children and Young People Policy Committee, said in a written statement the use of analytics has never placed professional human judgment or decision making. I think it would be something they lean on, at least. Davies says any impact would have been minimal because his staff never relied on the risk scores. So it was a waste of time. They weren't really using it to support their judgments because they didn't understand it and they didn't value it, he says. The lack of any records about how the risk scoring models worked or precisely why they were scrapped makes it impossible to know for sure. Anyone who was affected would likely never know the reason. As one Bristol City Council worker told the Social Finance Reviewers, something that's always on my mind, do people we're talking about know we have this data? Probably not, no. Predictive algorithms used by Avon and Somerset Police. A bunch of them. Reoffender, in use, they're all in use, so why have we got that field? Timeliness daily, calculating risk of reoffending in next 12 months. Well, that's useful for police. Niche, find crimes that have non-crime in data. Okay, so try and predict crimes from non-criminal data. Bit creepy that. Re-victim, calculate risk of being a victim again. Re-victim domestic abuse, re-offender domestic abuse, missing persons. Okay, burglary, blah blah blah, lots of stuff here. Cats and dogs living together, moving on. When John Pegram received confirmation he was in the offender management app in 2024, he remembers thinking, bloody hell, I've been here before, and I know what you're trying to do to me. As a teenager, Pegram had grown used to police attention. He recalls being stopped by the police dozens of times, something he attributes to being a mixed-race kid in a largely white town. It was less clear to him why he'd ended up in the app. At a 2017 anti-fascist protest in Bristol, he was arrested for striking a police officer in the face. Well, you know, that's kind of one of those things that maybe you should not be doing. Don't punch people at all, but particularly don't do it to the police. While the officer conceded it appeared to be an accident, Pegram was convicted of assault. Well, he can't have officially conceded that, because if he's convicted for assault, that would be a miscarriage of justice, wouldn't it? 7 years had passed, but did that incident mean he was still being flagged as a likely offender? He had little confidence in the accuracy of any predictions that would be made about him or others. There's a lot of bias in the police data, he says. There's too many issues for it to be done ethically and fairly. Well, unfortunately, you need biases in order to process data quickly. So if there are patterns that appear from certain ethnic groups, then that is useful data. You can't shy away from that. It's important. In response to Wired's public records request, Avon and Somerset Police provided a huge trove of performance data for 13 risk models used between 2017 and 2024, including those used to predict missing people, antisocial behavior, and who was most likely to commit or fall victim to crime. Wired passed this data along with other contextual information about Avon and Somerset Police's data science program to the independent AI auditing firm Atikas for a review. The verdict was damning. Most of these models produce low precision scores, meaning a high proportion of the individuals they flag as risks are incorrectly identified. The data review found a model used to help predict burglars would appear to operate with a precision rating lower than 10% for more than 3 years, according to the police data. According to Atikas, that meant fewer than 1 in 10 flagged as high risk would actually offend. 1 in 10 is 10% chance. Is that a good thing? That might sway some judgments on funding maybe, or deciding whether somebody's a likely suspect maybe. Other concerns include performance metrics for various models shifting sharply. It is not typical of well-governed models in operational use, the audit observed. The spokesperson of the Avon and Somerset Police told Wired that the force chose not to deploy some of the models it developed, including the one relating to burglaries. When asked why the force had years of audit and performance data for models it did not use, the spokesperson said the audit process was automated and used data from a static file, which was not deleted when the decision was made not to deploy the model. The police force declined requests for interviews about its data science work and did not respond fully to a detailed list of questions. Each model is scored based on its performance, and where issues are identified, they will be updated or turned off. The Avon and Somerset police spokesperson said in a statement, adding that models are reviewed by a police subject expert before they are deployed. What is all this? Performance of an Avon and Somerset police risk scoring model, which was designed to calculate a person's risk of committing a burglary in the next year. The model's performance is calculated using accuracy, precision, recall, and Matthews correlation coefficient scored. Well, Matthew's very good at that, isn't he? I don't really know what I'm looking at there, but Matthew showed us. Well done, Matthew. It's not clear what steps Avon and Somerset Police took to address the risks raised by its own ethics committee in the early days of its data science work. The committee did not appear to discuss predictive analytics again after 2017, according to records request disclosures. And while Avon and Somerset Police say on its website that each product and project pursued as part of its data science work is reviewed by a dedicated ethics group, the spokesperson told Wired, there has so far been no meeting held because no model has been produced for which potential ethical issues have been identified. In response to one public records request, Avon and Somerset Police supplied a screenshot of a bias check app that appeared to monitor and compare average risk scores for white individuals and people of color, concluding there was no significant difference between the two. The ethics review said simply including ethnicity as a monitoring variable is not equivalent to testing whether the model produces discriminatory outcomes, describing the absence of more detailed testing by ethnicity, gender, and socioeconomic status as a significant omission. Exactly, but also the problem of making a stark comparison between white people and people of color. You're lumping every person who has a certain amount of more melanin in their skin than the average Northwestern European into one group. But these people are coming from all over the world, from all sorts of countries, and they bring with them their cultures. Some of them are highly compatible and wonderful. Other ones are not so compatible with the West, and in my opinion, not quite so wonderful. So it's complete garbage data. You're comparing two irrelevant things to each other. Would you compare, let's say, the behavior of somebody in Russia and their culture with somebody from, I don't know, San Francisco? They may both be ethnically the same, but they might behave very differently if they were thrown into a impoverished situation. So that's a very weird thing that some people like to do. It's complete nonsense. Just because your skin is a little bit darker doesn't mean you're the same as that other dude over there whose skin is also a little bit darker. You might come from a completely different family, completely different everything. Anyway, stop moaning. Asked whether he believes predictive analytics has a role to play in policing or social work, Davies says further work is needed. When we were trying to do it, we were trying to do it for the right reasons, in the right way. But we didn't have the capacity that it probably needed. Part of that work should look at how risk models can inform workers without nudging them into foregone conclusions, he says. There is a risk that staff see the computer say something and then don't use their own judgment. Predictive analytics continues to play a significant role in policing and public services in the region. Bristol City Council still uses a risk scoring model to assess the likelihood of a child falling out of education, employment, or training. Avon and Somerset Police's latest audit data, provided in July last year, indicates that the model used by the Offenders Management app correctly predicts just 1 in 3 people who actually offend, while 1 in 4 people flagged as likely offenders do not. Hang on, what's the difference there? Correctly predicts just 1 in 3 people who actually offend. That's a 33% accuracy. That seems pretty good. Is that a good thing? And then you go and say, well, 1 in 4 people flagged as likely offenders do not. But surely if 1 in 3 do, then 2 out of 3 don't. And that's not bad. And you just completely fudged my mind up there. What are you talking about? You're mixing thirds with quarters and throwing one here and the other one there. No, I don't like that. Throw that in the trash. Moving on. Last year, Avon and Somerset Police told Pegram that while he had a profile on the Offender Management app, he had not been given a risk score because he had not been linked to any offence in the past 2 years. He still doesn't know what other data is held or how it might affect his interactions with the police. In July 2025, Pegram's lawyers wrote to Avon and Somerset Police again, notifying the forces of his intention to mount a legal challenge. The Avon and Somerset Police spokesperson declined to provide any comment on Pegram's case or legal proceedings, although they said the police force is now identifying an independent party to review its models. Pegram wants his details removed from the app, but he also wants Avon and Somerset Police to scrap the program entirely. It's not just me, he says. I don't think an AI model should have that kind of power over people's lives. But the direction of travel seems clear. The UK government has just created a police AI, a £75 million backed body that would help to roll out a variety of AI tools to 43 police forces across England and Wales. The group is hosted by the College of Policing, led by Andy Marsh. Launching the project earlier this month, the UK's policing minister Sarah Jones said, "This is the future of policing, and it is happening now." Yeah. Well, one of the only ways I think the United Kingdom and Europe at large can maintain grip on its integrity is through AI and policing. And I don't like the solutions that are probably necessary to hold that country together, but I think a lot of AI, a lot of profiling of people and predictive profiling of people, a lot of trying to ring-fence communities and keep people apart, probably using models like this to herd ethnic groups around. I think AI will be used over there in Europe to add enough noise so that people don't really get to know each other and introduce enough divide so that they don't get on each other's nerves so much, would be my guess. Because the way civilization has been unfolding up until now requires people to have a like for the country they live in, and that seems pretty important. But without that, I guess you could replace it with distraction, AI-based distraction and profiling of people and stuff. So I think this is not going to go away. This is only going to become more and more of a feature for law enforcement, profiling of people, not just in Europe. I think it's coming to the States as well, but they're clearly running an experiment over there at the moment to see if they can pacify the natives to this large influx of migrants. And there's a lot of friction there, so I don't know. But it's only going to work if they include all of the data that is necessary. And if they're too scared to ponder stuff like ethnic origins, national origins, and other cultural issues, then this data is going to be nonsense. Complete and utter useless. Thank you for joining me wherever you are. Make sure you hit that like button if you like me. You can also follow me wherever you are. But that is it for now. And the only thing I have left to say is Pigwig out.
Oink, oinkity, snort, snuffle, snuffle, squee, oink, oink, wee, squeal, snort, snort, oinkity, squee. Oink, oink, oinkity, squee, squee, wee, 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 snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinkity, oink, snort, snort, squee, oink, 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 wee, 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 oh. Snort, snuffle, oink, squee, squeal, wee, snort, oinkity, oinkity, oink, oink, snuffle, wee, squee, snort, oink, squeal. Oink, oink, oinkity, squee, squee, wee, 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 snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinkity, oink, snort, snort, squee, oink, 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 wee, 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 oh. Oink, oinkity, snort, snuffle, snuffle, squee, oinkity, oink, oink, snuffle, wee, squee, snort, oink, squeal. Oink, oink, oinkity, squee, squee, wee, 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 snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinkity, oink, snort, snort, squee, oink, 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 wee, 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 oh. Squeal, squeal. Snort, shuffle, oink, re-squeal, re-snort, oinky, oinkity, oink, 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 snuffle, re-squeeze, snort, oink, squeal, oink, oink, oinkity, squee, squee, re-re-re, snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squee, oink, 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 re-re-re, re, oh. Squeal, squeal, snort, snuffle,